So now we'll be moving to the technical sessions of this faculty development program. And the first session of this faculty development program is by Dr. Sanjay Kumar Jain from National Institute of Hydrology, Roorkee. And in the area of remote sensing, he is one of the renowned personalities of our country. I request Dr. Padi to take over and introduce Dr. Sanjay Kumar Jain.
Thank you, Dr. Pratik. Hello, everyone. Very good morning to all of you, and a warm welcome to our 5-day faculty development program. On behalf of the organizing committee, I, Dr. Alora, the host of the presentation, would like to give a brief introduction of our respectable speaker, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Jain. Dr. Jain is currently serving as Scientist G and head in the Water Resource System Division of National Institute of Hydrology, Roorkee, and a nodal officer, World Bank added National Hydrology Project. His area of specialization includes slow or glacier melt runoff modeling, glacier changes and glacier lake outburst modeling, application of remote sensing and GIS, river morphology, etc. Now coming to his achievements, Dr. Jain has published several papers in peer-reviewed international and national journals and many conferences proceedings. He has also published many book chapters and many scientific reports. With regards to consultancy and sponsored projects, he has completed more than 30 projects. For his notable research work, he has visited several countries such as USA, Netherlands, UK, Germany, and many Asian countries. For his scientific contribution, he has received the Best Scientist Award of NIH in 1999. At present, he is the joint editor of Journal of Remote Sensing, and he is the fellow of Institute of Engineers and also in Indian Association of Hydrologists. With this, I would like to welcome Dr. Jain, and it is our immense pleasure to have him with us. Now I request Dr. Jain to take over the forum and deliver the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arora, and I am thankful to Dr. Hitesh, Dr. Gopal, and Ms. Shivani Bist for giving me this opportunity to talk in this particular LTP program. Good morning to all. Now I am going to share my presentation. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
thank you. So today the topic of my talk is applications of remote sensing and GIS in snow glacier monitoring and runoff modeling. In fact, we are working in this area for the last 20 years and we are carrying out a number of studies in this particular Himalayan region. As previous speaker, Dr. Prakash Chauhan told you that there are a number of geospatial applications in water sector. So one of the application of this is in snow glacier monitoring and runoff modeling. So before I start, just I would like to inform you here that we have a lot of water resources which is there in Himalaya. And as we know that our country is having 35% of the geographical area as mountains, out of which 58% is covered by mighty Himalayas, in which we have more than 5,000 glaciers covering about 38,000 square kilometers. And we have number of river systems in Himalayan region which are originating from Himalaya, and the seasonal snow and glacier melt which is coming from the Himalayan rivers is a dependable source of water for irrigation, hydroelectric power and drinking water supply. The hydropower generation is another dimension which is contributing about 26% of total installed capacity, in which Himalayan river system contributes about 78%. So I can say that snow and glacier melt runoff modeling, which is a crucial element to predict runoff from snow-covered or glaciated area. So we have to see this resource of snow and glacier and how much water we are getting during the summer season. That is the purpose of this particular studies. So as you know that the Himalaya in our country or beyond our country is covered in 3 major basins: Indus, Ganga and Brahmaputra. So these 3 basins, they are originating from the Himalayan region, and they are giving the water, about 60% of the water, to our country. So they are very much important, and I can say that the snow and glacier melt runoff in these rivers, particularly if we see in Indus, we are getting a lot of snow and glacier melt runoff for the different power projects. Like if I say that in Bhakra project, which is one of the largest project of our country, we are getting about 60% of the total runoff as snow and glacier melt runoff. So these type of studies which we have carried out, I will explain in brief, and how remote sensing and GIS can help us in monitoring of this snow and glacier cover change, that I will cover. So why snow is important? Everybody knows that during winter season we are getting a lot of snowfall in our Himalayan region, and that represents about 80% of all freshwater resources on the earth. And snow melt runoff, as I have said, is a technique through modeling that we can use to see how much water will be generated if that much of snow or glacier is melting from April onwards till the next snowfall, that is in the month of September or October. So that we have to see. So here we can say that there are 3 elements. One is snow, that is the porous and permeable aggregate of ice crystals, and this is the temporary snow, which is, or we can say this is the temporary input which we are getting, and then it is converting into ice when the density is more, and then finally we are getting glaciers. So glacier is what? When ice mass became sufficiently large, and then due to gravity and creeping it starts moving. So that is the glacier. So we are having 3 inputs, I can say: snow, ice and glacier, which we have to see through remote sensing. So if we are talking about the visible imagery of or visible wavelength region of the satellite which we are getting, that is in the range of 0.6 to 0.7, in that snow has a highest amplitude. And if we have to separate out snow from the other features on that particular ground, then visible region of the electromagnetic spectrum is good enough. But there are certain limitations which I will explain in the coming slides. Another reason which we have to take care in Himalayan region is the shadows. The Himalayan mountains are rugged, as you know, and have high relief. So that also we have to consider, because sometimes what happens, because of the shadow, we cannot clearly see the snow covered area. So that also we have to take into account when we are talking about the identification of snow. Another problem which we are facing because of the similarity in this snow and cloud, if you see the false color composite, I suppose the participants are having background in remote sensing, so I'll not cover some of the basic things of remote sensing here. But I would like to say that there are certain elements which we have to consider when we are talking about the delineation of different features which we can see on satellite data. So cloud cover is one of them. If there is a cloud cover and snow, then it is very difficult to differentiate between these two. And there are some techniques which I will discuss in next slides. So here you can see on the left side, I am just showing one false color composite of Himalayan region. There you can see the wet snow, the water, the debris cover. That is another issue which we have to tackle, especially in glacier cover area. So 1 and 2 here you can see shadows on snow, and because of that it is difficult to identify the snow which is there. Okay, the ablation area bare ice classes was easily made, that we can identify easily, but some of the features which you can see in a better way in the next 2 slides. So here you can see the snow and cloud. Of course, if you see them on a satellite data, it is sometimes very difficult to differentiate between these two. So our first task is to clearly know how much snow cover area is there in that particular basin which we are going to study. Because once we know the the extent of snow cover. Only then through modeling, we can know how much water it will generate during summer season. Just a minute. So you can see here, and if you visualize here on the left false color composite, that the snow and cloud, there are the two features there. On the right side, you can identify snow and cloud clearly. And you can see on the bottom, there is a false color composite of band 432. Okay, infrared and visible part. On the right side, false color composite of 532. This is our own satellite, which is called as IRIS-LIS3 onwards. So what is there? There is an additional band in the right side picture. That is short wave infrared band. So if we are having short wave infrared band, then we can easily see that snow and cloud we can easily identify. So this is one way. If we are selecting proper band, then we can easily identify what is snow and what is cloud. Because I will repeat it again, that our aim is to clearly identify in a basin, in a catchment, how much snow covered area is there on a particular date, and how it is going to deplete over the coming days when that temperature will increase. Okay, so in this way, that is one way to identify snow and cloud. Another way is through some of the indexes. As I have said, that cloud and snow have more or less same reflectance. Mountain shadows, they are the problem. So there are a number of techniques for classification of the satellite data, unsupervised, supervised, and other advanced techniques which we can apply to know how much is the area of a particular feature is there. So one technique like NDVI, NDWI, normalized difference, vegetation index, water index, they are the different index which we are using. Similar to that, in snow and glacier cover area, we are using normalized difference snow index. So you can see here, we have considered SWIR band. If we are creating an output from our raw data, then we can see the different values of NDSI. So why we have taken these two bands? Snow exhibits high reflectance in visible band and a strong absorption in short wave infrared band, so that we can identify different features easily, or we can delineate snow cover area easily. So there are a number of satellites in the orbit, starting from our the first satellite, which remote sensing satellite, which was launched in 1972. That is called as Landsat. And after that, Indian remote sensing satellite, which we are using extensively for different applications. As Dr. Prakash Chauhan said, that in 1988, IRIS was launched, and since then we are having IRIS-1, 1A, 1B, LIS-1, LIS-2, LIS-3, etc. Then Cartosat, ResourceSat. So the number of sensors are there, and number of satellites have been launched by India, by ISRO. Then NOAA and MODIS, they are the two satellites which are not exactly remote sensing satellite, but we are using these two satellite data also in our studies. The resolution is poor, because resolution matters in remote sensing, everybody knows. If we have to work for a very small area, then we have to go for a high resolution data. But like if we are working on a very large basins, like Indus, like Satluj, one of the tributary of Indus, in which we have done a number of studies in Bias. So in these basins, if they are large enough and we are taking a satellite data of NOAA and MODIS, then we can get snow cover area not in a inaccurate manner. So we can identify snow cover area even using MODIS and AVHRR data. The advantage of MODIS and AVHRR data, particularly in snow cover mapping, is we are getting daily pictures, daily images. As you know that sun synchronous satellites, we are not getting daily images. So like WISH data, our own IRIS data, WISH sensor. So their resolution is good. That is 180 meters in comparison to MODIS or AVHRR. But the repetitive is less. And during monsoon period, means when we are getting most of the snow melt starting from April, particularly in May, June or July, we are getting a lot of cloud cover. So we are not getting very good scenes or cloud-free scenes, particularly during this period. So there, if we are getting MODIS or AVHR, which is daily, so chances of getting cloud-free data throughout the month is more. Because our aim is to know from April to September, at least, how much snow cover variation is there. I will show you one of the slides. So here what we did, we compared MODIS, WIFS and NOAA data for Satluj and Beas basins. Here I am showing you outcome of the study which we have carried out for Satluj basin. So here you can see the difference between these three bars of MODIS, WIFS and NOAA is not much. So we can say that the purpose of carrying out this study was to know whether the resolution of satellite data will affect that much on the snow cover area which we are getting. So what we have found that we can use WIFS, NOAA and MODIS data in case of snow cover area for a very large basin. So that way this study was carried out, and this paper we have published, and we applied this MODIS and NOAA data for a number of basins. So here if you see, so here if you see that for Satluj basin, I am showing you the boundary of Satluj basin. I can understand that everybody is well aware how we can draw a boundary from a DEM or from Survey of India topo sheets. So this is the boundary of a Satluj catchment up to Bhakra, because it is a low resolution, so you cannot clearly see in this particular image where that Bhakra reservoir. But just upstream of that, you can see another reservoir, which is one of the major reservoir again, which is on Beas River, that is Pong River. So anyway, you can see here from January, February, March, then July and August, how much snow cover variation is there. So you can easily see that during January, February, March, of course, that basin is covered 70 to 80% by the snow cover. And in the month of July and August, it is 10 to 15%. So it means about 60% of the area which was snow covered is vacated by snow, and some kind of glacier melt also was there and has been converted into water in the month of April onwards. So our snow cover melting starts from April onwards, and it contributes to the water at the outlet, like in this case in Bhakra reservoir. This is one of the major source of water in this particular reservoir, that is around 60% on an average. And during April and May particularly, this is the only source of water, because we are not getting any rainfall contribution in these particular months. From June onwards, we are getting rainfall runoff. Okay, so the snow cover area is one of the important inputs. Similarly, if you see the MODIS, same thing, you can visualize here how much snow cover area variation is there. If I plot that, like we did for number of basins, since 2000 we are getting MODIS data, and before that we were having IRS or Landsat data. So we have used number of satellite data, Landsat and IRS also we have used, but MODIS and NOAA, they are the daily images they are giving us. So we have used extensively MODIS data also, and it is freely available. So we can download the MODIS data, and then we can know how much snow cover area is there on a particular day. So here if you see, in these four basins which we have studied for our snow and glacial melt runoff modeling, there you can see that Satluj, Ravi, Beas and Chenab basins, they are the basins of Indus river system. So here if you see that the snow cover area which was maximum up to 80% or so is coming up to 10% or so. Okay, so this snow cover depletion curves we have to prepare. This is one of the major input if we have to know how much snow melt runoff we will get. Okay, so this we have to prepare first, and then we have to do our modeling. So if we are talking about the snow and glacier melt contribution, in a Himalayan basin. So there are three sources. So in rain, because that like Bhakra Basin, if I'm talking, that is at a height of about 500 meter or so. And this basin, the top of this basin or the highest point of this basin is around 6,000 meter. So our variation is from 500 to 6,000. So up to 2000, I can say that the whole basin, only rainfall runoff contribution is there in the lower part of that basin. In the middle part of the basin, there will be a lot of snow cover area during winter season, and that will melt out during summer period. All that snow will disappear during this period. So that is from 2000 to 4000 meter. So that is snow and rain combination. Then the third one is the highest part, that is glacier fact. Of course, snow is also there. So that also we have to consider. There is also snow cover area over the glacier boundary. So first snow which is there on the glacier cover area will melt out, and then some glacier melt runoff will also be there beyond 4,000 meter or so. So we are having three sources now. Like in plain area, we have only rainfall runoff, while in Himalayan region, we have rain, snow, and glacier. So here you can see rain-fed, outer Himalayan, middle Himalaya, snow also, and greater Himalaya, we have ice or glacier also. And base flow, of course, is there whenever we are talking about the stream flow. So if you have to do snow melt runoff modeling or stream flow modeling in Himalayan basin, then what are the main steps which we have to apply? Like in plain area, as I have said, the variation of our elevation is not that much as compared to our Himalayan region. So we cannot consider the whole basin as a one unit. So therefore, our first task, if we have to do some kind of runoff studies in the mountainous areas or Himalayan region, is to divide the whole basin into elevation bands or zones from 500 to 6,000 meters. So 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, and like that. And of course, as you know that the temperature and precipitation also changes with height, with altitude. So that also we have to keep in mind, because temperature is one of the major reason for the melting of snow. So that temperature distribution, precipitation distribution. Variability of snow covered area. As I told you earlier, that we have to have snow cover depletion curves. Forms of precipitation, at what temperature it will be rainfall and at what temperature it will be snow. So that also we have to consider the temperature and form of precipitation. There is another important input which we are getting in Himalayan region is melt due to rain. When rainfall is falling over snow covered area, then because of the impact of rain, there will be melting. So that also we have to keep in mind and we have to see that. Then degree day factor for snow and ice. This is on the basis of how much persistent temperature is there. That is called as the degree day factor for snow and ice. And then of course, as we are doing in rainfall runoff modeling, the routing of surface and subsurface flow. So these all steps we have to consider when we are talking about the stream flow modeling in the upper or Himalayan region. So one of the things which I have just said, that temperature distribution. And as you know that as we go up, the temperature will start decreasing or falling. So that is nothing but called as temperature lapse rate. So as per the standard criteria, the temperature lapse rate is 0.65 degree per 100 meter or 6.5 degree per kilometer. So it means with the height difference of 1,000 meter, temperature in that area will fall by 6.5 degree. That is the standard. Because we cannot have the lapse rate for different season, because we don't have much of the temperature measurement in Himalayan region in the higher altitude. So what we did, we tried satellite data, thermal remote sensing, to know how much will be the land surface temperature. there are two temperatures. One is air temperature, whatever we are talking is air temperature. Another is land surface temperature. Because using satellite, we cannot get air temperature, we can get what? Land surface temperature. So we have tried to get land surface temperature on the basis of thermal remote sensing. There are a number of satellites now. No Indian satellite is having thermal wavelength region, but like Landsat is having. Maybe some of you are knowing. So using this thermal data, we can know the land surface temperature. So the same we have tried in number of basics, like I am presenting for one of the basic, how we can do that using satellite. This is one of the important input which we are taking into account when we are talking about the Himalayan basic. So this we have tried for the first time a few years ago, and we submitted that paper in international journal, and then after going through that, this was published, and it was the first this type of work which we have carried out to know the land surface temperature variation and linked it with the air temperature to know the lapse rate. So LST from NOAA, from MODIS we can get, and from the Landsat also, wherever there is a thermal band. So there are a number of algorithms are available. So split window algorithm we have to use when we are talking about the land surface temperature, and it depends upon the brightness temperature in different bands. So here just I am showing you this picture or slide. On the left side you can see a DM, digital elevation model. On each and every grid we know the elevation. On the right side I am showing you the LST of the Satluj basin, you can see here. So on the left side this is the variation of elevation, on the right side it is the variation of land surface temperature in degree Kelvin. So if you see the two pictures here, you can easily see that the pattern is same. Why? Because temperature is following the same pattern as of elevation. So what we have tried, first we have generated a DM and a LST map of that particular area. DM, of course, we have one DM, but LST, it will change with the date. So number of satellite data or number of LST maps have been prepared. And then we cross this DM with this LST. So that way you will get what? Elevation versus LST. On x-axis you can see elevation, on y-axis temperature in degree Kelvin. Thousands of points will be there on an image. If you cross them, because there are thousands of grids. So if you plot them, you will get this one. And if you draw a best fit line, then you will get y is equal to mx plus c. So what is m? It is nothing but the slope of this particular line, which represents the rate. So here if you see during winter month, 0.78, while we were taking earlier 0.65 as a standard. So during winter season, you can say our value is much more than 0.65. Okay, during October, November, it is near about 0.65. And we have found during monsoon season, like in June and July, it is even going 0.4 also. Okay, so I mean to say the value of this coefficient, that is lapse rate, is varying from 0.4 to 0.8. So if we are taking 0.65 as an average value throughout the year, we are getting some error. So that's why we did this exercise, so that whenever we are using that lapse rate in a modeling exercise, there we have to vary this lapse rate also. Okay. So you can see here that the relationship between these two. Now just to check whatever we did using remote sensing is correct or not. So what we have done, we have taken the lapse rate at number of stations for which we were knowing the air temperature. Okay, so this air temperature we can get from the field. And Bhakra Beas Management Board, they are collecting data regularly in Satluj and Beas Basin. So we have taken that daily temperature data from them, and then we plotted the air temperature, the LST from NOAA, LST from MODIS. So what we found that the pattern of these three is almost same, and air temperature is slightly more than in most of the cases. In lower altitude, if you see, higher altitude, they are matching at some of the places. But if you see, the pattern is more or less same. So we can say whatever lapse rate we are getting through LST, that can be applied to air temperature also. Because in modeling, we are using air temperature as well as the lapse rate of air temperature. Why we are using lapse rate? Because we don't know temperature, air temperature of number of stations, and we have to consider elevation from 500 to 6,000 meter. Suppose we don't have temperature at higher altitude, then on the basis of lapse rate, we can estimate temperature in the higher altitude, even if we don't have any air temperature there. Therefore, we are using this lapse rate. So using remote sensing, that is now possible. Okay, so in different months, you can see the values of lapse rate. In September, it is 0.53, 0.5, or even sometimes we have seen it is going up to 0.4. So these values then we have taken in our modeling exercise. So my just purpose of giving just exposure of this lapse rate was, or temperature, this LST was just to know how much temperature variation is there in that particular basin. Okay, because that is very much required. How much temperature is varying in that particular basin, and on that basis only we can know the melt runoff. So you can see that our air temperature and land surface temperature, if we have plotted, we have taken the daily values, as I have said, for different stations in Satluj Basin. So here you can see 8 station data we could get from Bhakra Beas Management Board, and then we plotted, and we have found that a good correlation between these two temperatures. So we can use LST for our labs. Now coming again to stream flow modeling with this background. This one, a flow chart of a model which we have developed at our institute. There are a number of snow melt runoff model. Earlier there were not so, but now we have. Maybe you are familiar with some of the models which we are using to know how much runoff will be generated from either rain or snow or glaciers. Okay, so this one model we have developed called as snow mod, and we have applied this model for a number of basins. So here you can see the different inputs which we require. So first is temperature and seasonal lapse rate, distribution of temperature. Second, as I have told you, is the snow cover area. And the third one is form of precipitation. So all of them we have considered when we have written this program. In Fortran actually we have written earlier, and we have applied for a number of basins. So form of precipitation, when it is rain, then it will come to distribution of snow and it will contribute directly. When it is form of precipitation, then rain and distribution of rain and rain melt. So there will be snow melt plus rain melt. This will be the total runoff which will be generated in the basin. And then it will be routed because there will be some kind of losses. Okay, and then base flow. So all of them, when we route, then we will get the total stream flow. So total stream flow in case of a Himalayan basin will consist of rainfall runoff, snow melt runoff, snow and glacier both, and the base flow. So we have three components: rainfall runoff, snow and glacier melt runoff, and base flow. So if we are applying any of these models, like snow mode is our own model, we will get these three output after application of that particular software. And before that, we have to generate the inputs in a GIS. Like I told you, snow cover area and all those things for different elevation zones. That is very important in Himalayan basins. For each and every elevation zone, we have to develop this data. And every elevation zone has to be considered as one like sub-basin of that particular basin. We cannot take the whole basin as one unit in case of Himalayan basin. Okay, so just I will explain some of the models and then the study which we have carried out using these models. So one model which we have also used is variable infiltration capacity snow model. This is an energy balance approach. There are two approaches in snow and glacial runoff modeling. One is energy balance, another is temperature index, in which temperature we have to give the weight to the temperature. In energy balance, we have to consider the radiation also. So soil water assessment 2, which is one of the model which we are extensively using in modeling. So earlier we have carried out number of studies using SWAT model for rainfall runoff modeling. But now we are using this model for snow covered area as well. So it is a physically based semi-distributed model and uses of course spatial and non-spatial inputs. And in all the models we have to use of course the topography is one of the major input that through DM we are using. Land use, land cover of course, and soil physical properties. Non-spatial data we are using hydrometeorological data, rainfall, temperature, etc. And then we are applying that model in GIS. So ArcSWAT, ArcGIS and SWAT model interface is available. So we are applying that. Another model, as I have told you, we have developed our own model, and then in that we are considering physical features of the basin, which includes snow covered area, elevation zones, their area, altitude of meteorological stations, precipitation, temperature, etc. Okay, so these are the three models. I'll explain more these models through a case study which we have carried out for a number of basins. So I am explaining here it for Satluj basin. Here you can see that the origin of Satluj basin is in Tipat, and then it enters in India at a station called as Namigia. Then it goes into Pakistan. But here we have considered this basin only Indian part up to Rampur and up to Dhaka. So I am showing you just briefly, I will not take much time, just to explain how we can do this runoff modeling in case of Himalayan basin. So here if you see that this Satluj basin up to Rampur covers in India is this much. So we have number of stations where we have rainfall, where we have temperature. We have to divide that into number of elevation zones, etc. So you can see that this particular basin is having very much variation of the altitude. Rampur is at about 2000 meters or so. So most of the snow cover or glacier cover is beyond Rampur station. Okay, so that we have to estimate. So this is the flow chart which I have shown you earlier. I will not repeat it for snow model. So if we see the result of this particular model, I am just showing you the outcome. I am not going into detail. So what we did in this, we divided the whole basin into different elevation zones. For each zone, we then estimated the snow cover on different dates. The different dates means from April onwards, how that zone is having the snow cover. Lower elevation zone after May will have zero snow cover, because all the snow cover there will melt out in April in the lower zone. Then in the upper zone, it will go up to say June. Further, sometimes it will go up to July. And in some of the zones, it will be fully snow or glacier covered throughout the year, which are beyond 5,000 or so. Okay. So when we applied that, so we developed this input data for different elevation zones on the basis of the ground stations, on the basis of the satellite data. After processing of that satellite data, we could get all the inputs on different dates. And when we apply that model, we can get then rainfall due to rainfall, runoff due to rainfall, runoff due to snow melt, and runoff due to base flow, and Combination of these three will give me computed runoff. Here only the limitation of this particular model is we cannot differentiate between snow and glacier melt runoff. So snow and glacier melt will be one unit, means the total flow when the melting of snow and glacier will be there, we will get that value. Okay, so you can see here the different hydrograph of rainfall, snow melt and base flow and the total. And if we compare this with the observed one at Rampur, we are having the observed output or observed discharge, then we have to calibrate our model first on the basis of certain number of years. So 2000 to 2004, we calibrated our model and then we validated and we could get very good results. So R square is 0.92 or 0.9, which is very good. Similarly, then we have applied weak model. I will not go again into detail of this model. So we have to generate number of inputs and then we have to apply it. And again, I am just showing the results for these number of years. Again, we are getting good results after application of this particular model. And similarly, we applied SWAT model, which is a physically based model in which we generated again all the data from satellite data and then GIS. We stored all that data for different HRU. Then those inputs have been developed, hydrological response units in the whole basin. That whole basin has been divided into number of sub-basins and number of HRUs. And on the basis of that, then again, we could get the runoff as well as the water balance. How much we are getting the runoff due to rainfall, how much ET is there, how much snow melt runoff is there. So total water balance also using this model we obtain. Then the another model which we applied recently, last year only, that is SPHY, Spatial Hydrological Model. This particular model is useful if we have to know, if we want to know how much is snow melt and how much is glacier. The models which I have told you earlier, they are not giving us how much glacier melt is there and how much snow melt is there. Total we will get in the output. But here, using SPHY, it is having an advantage, and we applied this only last year for the first time in Himalayan Basin. And then again, I will say that we submitted this paper in Journal of Hydrology, and it was accepted in one go, and they have written as a remark that this technique we have to apply to other basins of Himalayan region so that we can know how much snow and glacier melt runoff we are getting. Because as you know that over the years glaciers have changed. I will cover that also, how the glaciers are receding and how they are impacting our runoff. I will cover that. So that is very important to know. As you know that because of climate change or global warming, our glaciers are retreating. And there are a number of power projects, how much water they are getting. Certainly because of this change in snow and glacier cover, there is change in the runoff which we are getting at the downstream area. At what time, how much water is available, that is very important to see if we have to utilize that water for different purpose. So, and if in future there is a climate change, then what will be the consequences of that climate change on runoff? That also we have to see. So this particular model is very much suitable for that purpose. So this we applied for a tributary of Satluj Basin, which is called as Baspa Basin, which is in Kannauр side in the higher altitude, and it is having number of power projects also. We received a request from a company which is working in that particular basin to study that type of study. So here again you can see that for different months we have prepared the snow and glacier cover map. So I am showing you the snow cover map computed from this model also. This model can give me output as snow cover also. Like snow cover area, we are preparing from satellite. So this model is also giving us the output, one of the output as snow cover. I'll tell you the advantage of this type of output. So if we compare the snow cover area between SPHY model and our MODIS, which is one of the input, so we are getting very good results from this model also. You can compare here. We cannot say that we are getting exactly the same, but if you see the coefficient of determination as 0.78 or 0.92, which is quite good. So this is one of the output. Then we applied this model for snow and glacier melt runoff. So here if you see that there are number of parameters which we have to consider. Okay, so there is a parameter range and then fitted values on the basis of calibration. So here at Sangla site we were having the observed discharge, and we have taken the satellite glacier maps of 2000, 2008, 2018, etc. And then for 2003 to 2010 we considered the glacier cover map of 2003, and then for 2010, and for 2018 also we have considered for this period of 2011 to 2018. So if you see here the total, if we compare, just I am showing you the snow and glacier melt runoff total. So observed, and of course if there is any rainfall runoff also. So computed and observed, just a comparison between these two. But if we want to see how much glacier melt runoff is there and how much snow melt runoff is there and how much rainfall runoff is there, then you can see here. And this particular basin is having number of glaciers. So we are getting good amount of glacial runoff also. So here if you see that of course snow melt runoff is more than glacier melt runoff, and the three you can visualize here for different years. So here if you see in different months how they are changing, how they are behaving. So this is the simulated Q, any total runoff. Then rain Q in different months we have plotted, and we have seen the behavior of this change over the years. I'll explain what is the outcome. But here you can see total simulated Q and rain Q. Similarly, glacier Q and snow Q in different months. Okay, starting from October to September. Some amount of glacier melt runoff also we'll get during December month also, very less. So if we see the changes in glacier map corresponding to elevations and the change. So here if you see from 2000, 2006, 2011, 2018, how the change in glacier volume. So that also we have estimated how much is the change in glacier volume that model is giving us. So for that particular basin, recently a study has been carried out at ISC Bangalore, and they have given these values for different years, as you can see in the second last column. In the last column, our model gives these results. So we can say that the total glacier volume is the area and depth also. So that volume is reduced by from 13.41 kilometer cube to 10.99 kilometer cube. And one of the study which in the next slides I will present, we have seen how much glacier change is occurring in this particular basin. Particularly in Western Himalayan region, we have seen that glacier loss is much more as compared to some other regions. This is about the modeling which we have carried out. SCA maps generated for this particular study. If we see, then SCA maps have been prepared, glacier maps have been prepared, then modeling has been done, and we have found that runoff from glacier melt is reducing at the outlet. One more study we have carried out for this basin, which I am not going to present, in which we have divided the whole basin into small watersheds. Small watersheds means the glaciated watershed. In some of the watershed, we are having a lot of glacier cover. In some of the watersheds, we are having less glacier cover. So what we have seen in the glaciated watershed, we are getting increase in glacier melt. In the watershed which are having less glacier cover, we are getting reduction in the glacier melt. Actually, what is happening over the years, glaciers are reducing and Once upon a time, the glaciers are very less in that particular watershed, so that we are not getting sufficient glacier melt runoff. While if it is a glaciated watershed, our increase because we are getting more and more melting because of this climate change, and there is sufficient glacier cover, so we are getting increase in glacier cover. If there is very less glacier cover, so of course our contribution will reduce in different watershed. And we have taken the whole basin because we have only one site at the outlet. So we have calibrated our model at that particular site, and then we applied that model for different small watersheds, which are not going to be presenting it in detail. This has been published recently in Journal of Hydrology. Okay, so this was in brief about snow and glacier melt runoff modeling. Now I am coming to the another thing, which is glaciers and how they are changing. Whatever we have discussed, most of the things that was related to changing snow cover. And maybe some of you are knowing that there are two zones or two areas if you are talking about glacier cover: accumulation area, ablation. And there is an equilibrium line. There are moraines, loose rock materials. There are moraine dam lakes. The lakes which is formed due to formation of dam from the moraine, and there is a lake formed due to that structure of moraine. Okay, so these are the different components of a glacier, and they are the glacier features. Again, if you see here, the same thing: accumulation and ablation area. There are different types of glaciers. Then snout, there is a lake at the outlet, or the snout. What is the snout? Snout is the last part of a glacier from where stream is emerging. Like Gomukh in Ganga basin is a snout in Gangotri glacier. Okay, that is the origin of the Bhagirthi, of course, and Alaknanda is joining from other side, and then at Devrayag they are forming as Ganga river. So they are different components of a glacier. So glaciers, as you know, are mass of ice slowly moving down a gradient and etc. I'll not go into the definition of this. Then glacier boundary, that we have to have from the satellite. So we have to differentiate between glaciers and non-glacier area on a FCC. During August and September, especially, we are getting the exposed glaciers, because after September or October, again snowfall will start in the higher altitude, and we cannot see clearly the glacier boundary. It will go on increasing till it melting in the month of June or July. Glacier melt starts late. We are getting first the runoff from the seasonal snow. Okay, so in the higher altitude, in August onwards or July onwards, we will get melting of glacier. So September month or August end month is the best season where we can get the glacier boundary clear. Okay, like we are applying any methodology to delineate snow cover area, we cannot apply on glacier cover area. I can say that there is no direct methodology, because there are a number of things, like there are debris cover over that area, and no technique can give you direct the glacier cover. Therefore, we have to go for some kind of manual delineation of glacier cover. We have seen, we have applied number of methods because of some of the limitations. Debris cover, they are looking more or less same as the moraine or something like that. So there will every time will be confusion, and no image processing technique directly we can apply to identify glaciers clearly. Okay, so we are taking a scene of August, September, and then most of the time we are doing the manual delineation. So as I have said, in glacier cover we have accumulation, that is in winter snowfall is more than summer ablation. These zones are called as the accumulation area. During winter we are accumulating that, and during ablation we are getting the melting. and there is an equilibrium. And maybe some of you have heard that our equilibrium line is shifting upwards because of our accumulation area is reduced. Okay. Then there are a number of techniques to know the glacier mapping. As I have said that there is no direct technique, but just to identify glacier cover, if we are talking about manual delineation, we are generating some of the output from our radar, like ratio of different bands. Then manual exclusion or inclusion of wrongly classified areas, manual delineation of especially debris covered areas, use of digital elevation model, because altitude will also affect our glacier cover area. So all that we have to do just to know how much glacier cover area is there. So in different years, if we want to see at an interval of 5 years or 3 years or like that, how much glacier cover is changing over the years, then we have to identify the glacier cover first and then we have to see. So like we did this in number of areas, like I'm presenting here only for 1 or 2 case studies quickly. So from 1976 to 2010, you can see the difference of this glacier cover in Gangotri Glacier. And if we overlay this on a Google Earth map, then you can visualize how it is shifting better. You can see in the next slide. So here you can see in 1966, on the basis of Survey of India topographical maps, our snout was at this location. In 2010, when we last carried out this study, we can see that this particular glacier has shifted from the upper point up to the yellow line. So that much of area which was there earlier as snow cover area is now, glacier cover area is now vacated by that glacier. So here this blue portion, light blue portion, is showing me the area which is vacated by the glacier, and the glacier extent have reduced over the years. So every glacier, most of the glacier, I cannot say every glacier, but if I am talking 1,000 means 70 to 80% of the glaciers are retreating over the years. Only few of them are advancing. So as I have presented before, just quickly I will show you the results, how we have seen the glacier change in Baspa Basin. So this is a Baspa Basin, which is having hundreds of glaciers with an area of 187 square kilometer in the year 2011 or so. So we can see the elevation change from 4,244 meter to that much. So all that we have to see. So you can see in the blue light blue color, these are the glaciers in this particular basin. So over the years, if you want to see, you have to delineate them and you have to see how they are changing. So just some of the glaciers, how they are changing over the years, I am showing you there. I am not going into detail about the number of glaciers which are changing, but just I am showing you in Survey of India topographical maps how that glacier boundary was there, etc. for some of the glaciers. So on the basis of that, then we have found that the blue portion, this is now in the whole basin is having no glacier. Okay. So this much area is vacated by that glacier loss. Here, if you see from 1976 to 2018, we have carried on. We have first we have seen that up to 2011, and then we have extended this to 2018. So here you can see in this particular basin from 1976 to 2018, I can say about 40 years. The area loss is 24%. So you can imagine how much area of glacial loss in this particular basin we are getting over the years. And on the basis of that, we have seen how much runoff reduction will be there as a whole and in different watershed, which I have shown you earlier. Okay, so we can say that in some of the basins, because of global warming, we can say that there is a lot of glacial loss, and that we can have from remote sensing satellite data of different years. So change detection we can get for different basins. So there are number of glaciers, like here we have more than 100, but if we are working on a very a larger area, then thousands of glaciers. So we have to have the change detection of all the glaciers, and then we have to see how much area reduction is there. Okay. So that study we have carried out for a number of basins recently, for other basins, and now we are going to apply our SPH5 model for other basins, like for Tista now we are doing in the eastern Himalaya. Beas basin we are planning to do. In Ganga also we are taking one of the basin, because our purpose is to know how much glacier change will affect our runoff. So for that we have to see the changes in glacier cover. So this first study we have carried out for Baspa basin. This is the second aspect which we are studying. One is snow and then glacier, and the third one, now I am coming to that just briefly. Within maybe next 10-15 minutes I'll finish this presentation, because I know that you have another presentation on 12. So here you can see, and maybe you have heard some of the glacial lakes which are breaching because of the rise in the water level. Maybe you have heard the incident of 2013 in Kedarnath area. There is a Chorabari lake, and it breached, and because of the breaching of that particular lake, we got a lot of water in the downstream area that was stored in that particular lake. So now this is one of the important area which we have to study, and NDMA and our ministry, they are now having a lot of program to study the glacial lake outburst flood. So just briefly I'll cover, and we have to do the modeling also. We are doing. We have carried out more than 10 studies on GLOF also for different hydropower companies. So the glacial dam lakes are formed by accumulation of water from the melting of snow and ice cover and by blockage of end moraines. Moraines are nothing but the loose material, rock material, residue of ice, etc. If they are making a barrier in the stream, then there is a lake generated behind that barrier. That is nothing but a lake which is vulnerable. There are a number of lakes, and most of them are not vulnerable. They are in the higher altitude. They are in the safe zone. There is no chance of breaching of those lakes. But the lakes which are having this type of structure, which are loose, which are chances of breaking of them, then the lakes which are formed behind them are vulnerable. So number of studies, as I have said, in Garhwal Himalaya, Eastern Himalaya, and Bhutan Himalaya also, or NHPC, we have carried out. So again, our first task is what? Like we are preparing inventory of glaciers. We have to prepare inventory of glacial lakes. Again, I will say that it is very difficult to get all the lakes after application of a particular image processing technique. But we can get different inputs like NTWI, normalized difference water index. We can apply on satellite data and we can get one of the output. So on the basis of NTWI map and on the basis of DEM, etc., we have to delineate the boundary of those glacial lakes. So this is the first task. And then there are certain criteria on the basis of which we can say that this particular lake is vulnerable. So our first criteria is increase in the water of that particular lake. So I'm just showing you one case study which we have carried out in Bhutan Himalaya for a lake which is called as Chibda Glacial Lake. Some of the lakes have been given the name like Chorabari. Chorabari is lake in Kedarnath side, which is named as Chorabari. So here you can see in this particular area, number of lakes. You can visualize them on a fascicular composite. One of the lake, as I have said, is Chibda Glacial Lake, which is increasing in the size. As you can see here, we have taken number of satellite, and then we have seen how that area is increasing from 1978 to 2010. So the area of this particular lake have increased about 3 times. So this is the first criteria. We have to identify all the lakes in that particular basin, and then we have to see how that lake area is increasing over the years. Okay, so this is criteria 1. Then what is the location of that? How much chance of any kind of rise in water level is there? Means if there is mother glacier associated with that particular lake. So if more melting will come to that lake, it will go on increase. What is the chances of any kind of avalanche is there? So all those criteria we have to keep in mind when we have to identify the lakes which are vulnerable. We did this exercise for all the basins, and we found that like in Chenab Basin, 3 lakes are vulnerable. In Satluj Basin, 2 lakes. In Beas Basin, 2 lakes. So these are the lakes. On the basis of these criteria, which we can get from remote sensing, will give us insight into the change in the glacial lakes. And then we have to consider those lakes for our modeling exercise, and we have to give the local authorities that these lakes are vulnerable and we have to be careful in future. These lakes, there are chances of breaching of these lakes. Recently, NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, have prepared guidelines also, in which we were the nodal agency, and these guidelines have been released in October 2020, in which they have given, 10 chapters have been given, in which we have given how we can delineate the glacial lakes and how we can identify the vulnerable lakes, and what is the responsibilities of the different authorities in case of there is any glacial lake breaching, how they have to act. All that have been given, means the guidelines for different organizations. So this is another area in Himalayan region we have to study. We have done one study in Janskar Basin also, where we have seen how that glacial lake will change. In 2 lakes, we have done that study. On the basis of satellite data or remote sensing data from different satellite, we have to first see how these lakes are changing over the years. So here you can see how that area is changing over the years of that particular lake. Okay, so that we have to do through image processing, and we can get. So I'm not going into detail about further into this clock modeling, because just I wanted to give an idea of lake identification and all that. So this is in brief about the lake identification. So now I'm coming to the concluding remarks, and then we can take up some of the questions if any participant want to know more on some of the aspect. So whatever studies we have done, and I can say that our institute is carrying out these studies for the last more than 20 years. And we are also monitoring some of the glaciers in the field, like Gangotri Glacier. Since 2000, we are monitoring at a station called as Bhojwasa, which is downstream of the snout of that glacier, which is at Gomukh. We are having our observatory at just downstream of that, called that place is Bhojwasa. So what we are doing, how much discharge we are getting, that we are monitoring at that particular station. We are having some monitoring stations in Leh. Okay, so we are doing some kind of field monitoring also, but most of the studies which we have carried out is on the basis of satellite data. So glacier and snow melt have major contribution to the river flows in the region. Like I have said, 60% in Bhakra. Then there is a Pando Dam in Beas, which is having 35%. At Devprayag, where Bhagirathi and Alaknanda is meeting, we are getting about again 30 to 35% of the runoff as the snow and glacier melt runoff. So that we have to see how that they are changing over the years, and in future also with climate change, how much the runoff we will get because of melting of snow and glacier. The rate, volume, and timing of snow melt are likely to change. That we have found. The total quantity we have found is not changing much, but the timing, that also is very important if we have to see how much water will be available because of these resources at a particular point. And then using some of the GCM outputs, we have to see what will be the projected temperature, precipitation, etc. And then we have to apply that model in those conditions, and we have to know how much runoff we will get at that particular time. So reduced contribution of snow melt from lower elevations, we have seen in some of the basins is counteracted by increased glacier melt. Stream flow initially increases as glacier melt. We have seen that also in some of the watershed, then decreases when big glaciers are depleted. Glacier retreat rates are not only controlled by changing in climate, but topographic and morphological factors that also we have to consider. And studies on the trend of changes in snow cover have been carried out almost for all the Himalayan basins, along with retreat of glaciers that we have to give more emphasis. So some of the studies already we have carried out, and we have seen in some of the basin snow cover is decreasing. In some of the basin we have found that snow cover have also increased. So climate warming will increase the frequency and risk of glacial lake outburst flood. So that we have to monitor. So regular mapping and monitoring. We cannot say that we have monitor all the lakes one time and they are sufficient. So we have to see, and we have to regularly update our inventory. And then we have to identify potentially dangerous glacial lakes. And we have to prioritize for further investigation. Okay. And then high resolution, sometimes satellite data can give us better picture. So like first we can make an inventory, and then we can see how that particular lake is increasing, and then the area of that particular lake using high resolution satellite data we can get. And then finally, appropriate measures to reduce the potential risk from these lakes. Recently, one project has been found by NDMA in Sikkim, Himalaya, in which now they are planning to apply early warning system. One of the lake is a dangerous lake there, and this project again they are giving us to monitor the lake and to install early warning system in case of lake breaching is there. Then how we can warn the people living there or the power projects in the downstream area. So this project means as a pilot project, NDMA is planning this year to have in Himalayan region, so that we can reduce the risk which may be there because of the breaching of the vulnerable lake. So this is all in brief about the snow glacier monitoring and modeling studies. And now we can take up some of the questions.
Thank you so much for your insightful talk. So I would like to request the audience, if is there any question, then they can put forward their question.
Participant can write also in the chat box if they want, or directly they can unmute
they
and
can
ask.
Yeah, we are unmuting them. So whoever will raise the hand, we will unmute them and they can ask the question.
Yeah, so participants have been unmuted. So if they wish to ask the questions, they can please, now their mic option is enabled. They can please unmute themselves and ask the question. Yes, Shrisha, please unmute yourself and please ask the question.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning, sir. So my question is, sir, when you're doing GLOF studies,
Yes.
Once can we, sir, in some other seminar I'd heard of that we can use the GLIMS data, sir. So how well can we rely on the GLIMS data for glacial identification? And from there, once we identify the potentially dangerous lakes, sir, is the snow cover area melt, snow runoff, an important factor for that potential dangerous lake identification?
Okay, so as you know, nowadays we are having a lot of open source data, GLIMS or RGI inventory for glaciers. So sometimes we need not to worry about the glacier map. We are getting regularly from these sources the glacier cover, one thing. So glacier cover can give us an insight into that particular area, how the glaciers are changing. Then the second thing is the glacial lake inventory, and which glacial lake is directly connected to mother glacier, means which is feeding to that particular lake. That is another. The third aspect which you have asked, that is the snow matter, which is not very much there in most of the glacial lakes, because we are getting much of the lakes which are there in the higher altitude, the glacier. Okay, so the snow melt runoff or glacier melt runoff, of course, is one of the factor which we have to consider, because on the basis of the water which we are getting into that particular lake will affect the area increase or rise in the level of that particular lake, and which is one of the major reason of breaching of that particular lake, overtopping. So that we have to consider, of course. But the GLIMS or RGI inventory we can use.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Anyone else? They want to know anything on this aspect?
Sir, thank you so much for the very informative talk. My fellow colleague, Dr. Jagbandhu Dikshit, has put a comment. He's mentioning that the talk was very highly informative, including different case studies. Thank you so much from Dr. Jagbandhu Dikshit. And now there is a question in the chat box from Lakshmi Gupta. Dr. Elora, can you please read that?
Yeah. It is Lakshmi Gupta is asking that how can we validate SWOT model?
Okay. Maybe you are knowing that if we are using any hydrological model for say rainfall runoff or snow melt, means whatever, or sediment heat. So what we are doing, first we are calibrating our model on the basis of the observed data, on the basis of some of the years. If suppose we are getting certain number of years data for that particular basin, so on the basis of certain years we are calibrating our model, and then on the rest of the years we are validating that. So similarly we are doing in SAT, if we are applying that model, say for Satluj basin up to Bhakra, and Bhakra we have our observed data. So first we have to calibrate. So we have to fit the best parameter values. So we are getting minimum means difference between the output, whether it means observed or computed. Okay. Once we have fitted those parameters, then we have to validate also for some of the years. So validation we are doing on the basis of some of the years. Okay. Or anything more you want to?
Is there any more question?
Means for validation, of course, we have to take certain number of years, and then we have to see whether we are getting good efficiency of that particular model for that validation period or not. Okay.
She says, thank you. Okay, any more questions from the audience side? If you have some problem in the mind, you can type. Okay.
Yes, one question I can see. They are available online. These guidelines have been prepared by number of institutions after spending about more than 1 year. NIH was the nodal agency, and on 11th of October, these guidelines have been released, and they are now available on the website of NDA. All the chapters, 10 chapters, they are the full guidelines.
Okay, sir, one more question is there. How to download multi-temporal data?
Means that I can send one of the presentation. Actually, we are taking a separate lecture on that, the open source data. Now we are using number of satellite data which are available in public domain. So there is a website of that particular satellite data. Like recently we have started working on Sentinel data. Earlier we have downloaded our Landsat data also, Aster data also. So there are a number of sites from where we can download satellite data for that particular region. Okay. So if you are interested, I can send that presentation in PDF, and you can then see there are a number of sites, and the procedure, etc. also we have given there. Our own Bhuvan by NRSC or ISRO, that is Bhuvan site. So we can also download from there some of the data. But the limitation is, suppose we want for a particular date, that date may not be available. So that case may be there. But most of the time now, for the last so many years, we are not purchasing any data from NRSC. We are downloading freely available data for our number of studies.
Sir, another question is there. We will also, sorry, in session 3. Okay. Dr. Uprativ will discuss about the downloading satellite data in session 3.
So there is a session, so you will know more about how to download and how means the sites and which are the data now available. So we have seen that high resolution data even we can download.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any more questions from the audience side? One
question I can see.
Yeah. We are trying to extract glacial lakes using deep learning models. We need more ground truth information for training the model, where we have to find marks.
It is very difficult because, like you know, that these lakes are in inaccessible areas. We cannot go up to that particular lake. Only some of the lakes which we can go. Last year only, or before last year, we have sent one team. They could not reach up to that point because of the limitation of army, etc. Then what they did, they have sent some army personnel to collect ground truth information for that particular lake. But with the availability of high resolution data or Google Earth even, you can see those lakes and some of the information on the area, better area you can get. But like if you want to know any more information, depth, etc., it is not possible. So if you are going to use some machine learning language or models, etc., for your glacial lake identification, and you want to know some ground truth information, there are certain limitations. But with the high resolution data, you can get some of them.
So one more question is there. What is the maximum resolution available to download?
Okay, you will learn more about this, but as far as my knowledge, up to 12.5 meter or so, we can download like Sentinel data. Earlier, it was not available free, but for the last few years, we can download. So I can say that up to 10 to 12 meter. I'm not very much aware, but I know that Sentinel is having that much of resolution.
I hope Balaji Prabhu got his answer. Any more questions from the audience side?
We can take one more question if there are any. Please feel free to type in the questions or unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation and delivering such a wonderful talk about the glacier or snow melt runoff. I hope the participants must have learned a lot of things from your presentation. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sanjay.